Well, welcome back to the latest edition of On Point. It's been a minute, folks, a little bit over a year and a half. I had the honor of serving as the chief spokesperson for the New York City Police Department as the deputy commissioner. What an honor. But after about a little bit more than a year or so in the public service, I'm back private. And On Point is going to be the focus of my attention among some other things here. As you see, my friend over there, Eric Ham, he, of course, is a political analyst extraordinaire out of Washington, D.C., and a best-selling author. He's been with us all this time, and we're going to start up again. And we've got to get right into it because, Lord have mercy, some might say this is probably the most important presidential election in history. I probably would pretend to agree to that. I think Eric might as well. So there's a lot to focus on right now. We're going to say this is off to the races. The Iowa caucuses have started everything off. Eric, let's talk about the Iowa caucuses. It seems like we had a crowded field of candidates on the Republican side, but it's whittled down to about two right now, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. What can you tell us about the caucuses? What can we look forward to with these two at the helm?
You know, these caucuses, even though Donald Trump looks like he's going to be head and shoulders the winner of these caucuses, this is still a very fluid process. We just saw recently Chris Christie get out of the race. Many of us didn't really see that coming at all. And then with Chris Christie out, immediately it looked like this could be Nikki Haley's chance to really improve her poll positioning, particularly heading into the caucuses. And so, of course, with that debate between her and Ron DeSantis, it didn't go, I think, like she would have planned. But still, it looks like this is Donald Trump's Iowa caucus to lose. And that'll be interesting because if many people probably don't remember this, Donald Trump did not win the caucuses back in 2016. He actually didn't win. And so now he's not only looking at winning, but he's looking at actually breaking Bob Dole's record of actually winning the Iowa caucuses by more than 14 points, which is what Bob Dole did back in 1988 when he won the Iowa caucuses. So Donald Trump is actually hoping that he can beat that spread, and then he can use that going into New Hampshire to halt Nikki Haley's momentum and hopefully put this race away and become basically the GOP nominee by the beginning of February.
All right, but he's in single digits. I think in New Hampshire now with Chris Christie out of the race and some voters maybe going over to Nikki Haley. Wouldn't you think that Donald Trump might be sweating a little bit now?
Oh, he certainly is, which is why you're seeing all of the fire from Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump placed squarely at Nikki Haley. Because Nikki Haley is trying to make this a race. And where that race begins is actually in Iowa. And so if she can come out of Iowa a clear second place finish, that gives her the momentum that she needs to continue heading into New Hampshire. What we got to look at about Ron DeSantis right now, Ron DeSantis is desperate because Ron DeSantis has basically taken over $100 million, spent it in Iowa, and now it looks like if he's lucky, he will finish third place there. And he hasn't spent any money in New Hampshire or in the subsequent early states, South Carolina or Nevada. So we're talking about someone who's basically bet it all on Iowa. And if this doesn't work for him, then it's one-way ticket back to Florida, baby, for him. So Nikki Haley actually has somewhere to go post Iowa. We know Donald Trump is going to be in this to the end. Ron DeSantis right now is the X factor because he's got nowhere to go after Iowa if he doesn't have a good second place finish. And it's looking very likely that he will not.
Before we focus on New Hampshire, I just want to ask you in terms of the last presidential debate on the Republican side with DeSantis and Nikki Haley, did you see any substance out of those two battling it out? It seemed like it was kind of, and many would say kind of sophomoric, a lot of name calling, but how much substance did you see there?
None whatsoever. In fact, Ron DeSantis, you could tell from the opening salvo that he came to the debate not to even discuss policy or substance. His whole agenda was to basically bring Nikki Haley down, which is very striking because here's what we're also seeing as we head into the Iowa caucuses. There is no candidate who is running in the primary, save for Chris Christie, who actually had a plan for how to confront Donald Trump. They all basically came in claiming to want to be the GOP nominee, but no one really had a plan as to how do you deal with the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is Donald Trump. And so what we have seen from Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, is that no one really had a plan, a strategy to how do you actually best Donald Trump. It's just like watching a sports team lose to their rival over and over and over again without a plan. How do you actually win a national championship without being able to do so if you can't actually get past your rival? And so that's what we saw throughout this process. And I think that's where we're now seeing how Donald Trump was actually very prescient in that he knew that there were no other candidates for him to actually have to confront in this race.
After the tone.
Well, I got to tell you, the phones are ringing off the hook right now. Obviously, what you're saying is hitting a nerve, like Nikki Haley said. Oh, my goodness sakes. Anyway, we're going to let that go. Hey, look, let's move on here now. Look, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is also one other person. It's the same person, Donald Trump. But he's facing 4 trials, 91 counts. What happens if he's convicted? And if that's the case, do you think there's any chance that Chris Christie might reemerge as a candidate?
I'm glad you brought that up because as you and I are talking right now, we know that closing arguments are taking place in a Manhattan courtroom in a civil trial where the New York Attorney General is actually seeking a fine of nearly $400 million, which will most certainly bankrupt Donald Trump's business if, in fact, a judge agrees to that. What Donald Trump has done and what he did, which was very present and very savvy on his part, was Donald Trump actually completely ignored the candidates in the race. And he made his criminal liabilities, he made them a strength. And so now Donald Trump in a courtroom, Donald Trump standing outside a courtroom, that has become basically a political prop for Donald Trump. And he has used that as rocket fuel to energize his campaign. And so where it would have been a two-front war where Donald Trump was fighting to stay out of prison, to maintain his business, and oh, by the way, try to win the nomination and the White House, he used that as a benefit to him. And now it's a prop where he didn't have to worry about the opposition candidates that was running against him because he took his greatest weakness and he turned it into an asset. Now, to your question, will Chris Christie get back in this race if Donald Trump is convicted? Well, here's the thing about that. We likely will not see a conviction until well after the primaries are over. And if Donald Trump is the nominee, that means the GOP is stuck with him, good or bad.
What a tangled web we weave here. Let's move off the Republicans for a second and focus on the Democrats. Obviously, Joe Biden, the incumbent, is running. He said he was going to stay in this race. I think that the major question that a number of people have about Biden, more so than that, well, there are actually two things. But let's first talk about Biden's age. He's 80, 81 now. There's a lot of concern as to whether or not with the wear and tear, you know how people get gray hairs after 4 years of the presidency, how he would be able to withstand another 4 years as president, as the commander in chief of this country. I've got to believe that that's got to be a concern.
I have had to talk about this incessantly as my time as a political analyst on television. My editors, where I write a column for CTV, have asked me to write about this extensively because this is an issue that simply isn't going away. And the reason it's not going away is because all of us know someone that is Joe Biden's age or close to it. And they are not doing the job, the grueling, demanding, never-ending job that Joe Biden is doing, number one. And then number two, they're not asking to do it for another 4 years. And so this is an issue in terms of his age that is not going to go away. It's going to be like Donald Trump's criminal liabilities. The age is going to be a liability for Joe Biden throughout this campaign. And the question for him is, can he do what Donald Trump did? Can he take his greatest weakness and turn it into an asset? We haven't seen him be able to do it so far. And we see how it's dragging his approval rating down, even though his administration has done some amazing things since he's been in office. But unless or until he can find a way to turn that weakness into a strength, this is going to be, I think, the 800-pound anvil that will be tied to his ankle and will drag him down. The question is, will it drag him down to the point to where it actually cost him election? Of course, we don't have the answer to that just yet.
Absolutely. You know, there's only one other person in history I can remember was Ronald Reagan when he was running and his age came up, and he turned it into a joke. And I think it actually galvanized, his campaign. People really were rallying behind him. That was a different time. Outside of Biden's age, of course, there's a whole issue of messaging. The Republicans are really masters at tearing folk down to a certain degree. But Biden, for some people, would say that he's done more, or at least as much as FDR did in terms of, you can even say immigration, the economy. The economy is in single digits. It's low, more jobs out there. Why is that messaging not translating into more people buying into what Biden and the Democrats have done the last, say, 3.5, close to 4 years?
You know, if we go back to the Obama years, particularly when President Obama was gearing up for re-election, we have to remember the economy was in the tank. He came into office hemorrhaging like 800,000 jobs a month. It was the worst the economy had been since the Great Depression. And it looked like the economy was finally on the upswing as he was heading into a re-election, but people didn't feel it. And so what Barack Obama had to do was two things. He had to somehow convince people that even though they were not feeling the upswing in the economy, he had to convince them that it was actually there. Mm-hmm. And he had to convince them to actually take a chance and give him a second term to actually be able to finish the job. What we see from Joe Biden right now is a candidate who hasn't actually met his greatest challenges head on yet. We saw Obama do that as a candidate when he gave that seminal speech on race. And we have seen Donald Trump actually, again, take his criminal liability and basically turn it into a political prop. So what Joe Biden is going to have to do, much like you mentioned with Ronald Reagan, he's going to have to meet this issue head on in terms of his age, number one, but in terms of the accomplishments that he has made, and there have been many, he's going to have to actually speak to that. He gave his initial address officially entering into the campaign, where he talked about this is going to be a campaign about salvaging American democracy.
Right.
And that might be true for him. But at some point, you've got to meet people where they are. And you've got to speak to those economic concerns and fears that they're feeling. And so right now, Joe Biden has a very wide canvas, and he's got to start covering some of that canvas up. Because if he doesn't, then what happened to Mitt Romney could very well happen to him, and that his opponent could actually make the case for him and before he gets to it.
Well, I got to tell you, we've run out of time here. There's so many things to chew on as we move forward here. The Hunter Biden factors we didn't get into today. Lloyd Austin is another thing that surfaced recently in the last week or so. And then, of course, Trump's woes. I mean, this is going to be a particular campaign as we move on now. We're 11 months away that may have a lot of twists and turns. And guess what? To help dissect us and navigate through all these twists and turns, you, Eric Ham.
Well, I will try to do my best. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this. And everybody, just want to let you know once again here on Point, our aim and our focus and our goal is not to sway anybody towards any particular candidate or any party. What we are trying to do now is be a responsible fourth estate, journalists, analysts here who are giving you unbiased information and facts as we know it. And if we need to change up in the middle of a stream, if there's something wrong that we may have said incorrectly or a fact that needs to be addressed or changed, we will certainly do that. We want to make sure that people are informed. I want to thank everybody for listening in to On Point. It's going to be a very interesting year, along with Eric Ham and myself, Julian Phillips. And we'll see you next week.